What is it like to drive for Uber and Lyft in Los Angeles? Now, you may be wondering, especially for my dedicated subscribers, what took me so long to make this video? I live in LA, so it would make sense that I would probably understand the Uber and Lyft scene more than anyone. But I will say this, I travel a lot, as most of you know. I've done a bunch of these videos about what it's like to drive for Uber and Lyft in Austin, or Boston, or Costa Rica, or Nashville, or whatever. Out of any city I've ever been to, I've never seen more of a spread of different perspectives, income, pros and cons, people loving Uber or hating Uber more than LA. And what's tough about this video is any single time I travel, I interview a lot of drivers, and I usually get like a good average, like, oh, they average about 30 an hour, or they average about 25 an hour. On average, they make the most money on the weekends, or the week of, whatever the case is. With LA, however, it is all over the place, and the average hourly rate, which is I feel like the biggest thing people want to know, how much money do they make, is anywhere from 20 to 35 an hour. And you're like, wait, that's a pretty big spread, which it is. I mean, making on average anywhere between $20 and $35 an hour, that's a $15 an hour spread. Here, I think, is the main reason why. One is that when it comes to LA or Los Angeles, I'm going to put that in quotation marks, it's not really a city, as it more refers to a area on a map that is a collection of cities. Like if I say Boston, Miami, Chicago, San Francisco, all these places are the city itself, right? Now, this sounds kind of odd to say, but when it comes to LA, and ask anybody who lives in LA, it really just refers to this huge blob in Southern California. There's a bunch of different areas. You have Westwood, Santa Monica, Venice, Manhattan Beach, Hermosa Beach, Hollywood, West Hollywood, Koreatown, downtown LA. I could go on and on and on. There's so many different subsects. In addition, there's a lot of debate of what is considered LA. For some people, they consider Reseda in the Valley, Los Angeles. Other people don't. So saying that you drive for Uber and Lyft in LA, if let's say you primarily drive in the Valley, you're going to have a very different experience than let's say if you drive by LAX or the airport around Playa del Rey, Playa Vista, all these different areas. LA is massively spread out more than any other area. I mean, it is very realistic, especially with traffic. Let's say I'm going from Reseda to LAX, and side note, I used to live in Reseda, which is why I keep using it as an example. It could easily take you an hour and a half, probably closer to 2 hours, depending on the traffic on the 405 and everything. That's a long distance, and that's still in the same city, so to speak, depending on how you look at it. And I think this is why a lot of Uber and Lyft drivers have such different perspectives. I've talked to some drivers who hate driving here and say, I'm not gonna lie, I only make maybe 15 to 20 an hour, especially if it's a low day, but around 20 an hour. I hate dealing with the people, etc., etc. On the other end, I've met people who are like, I love driving here. I only work a few days a week and I'm able to pay all my bills and I'm spending money. I love Lyft and Uber. And I was even talking to one guy, this was a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about like our best weeks that we've ever had driving. And he's like, not gonna lie, man, he's like, the best week I've ever had driving, $5,000 in 1 week driving here in Los Angeles. On average though, he goes, I make at least a couple grand a week just driving normally. And I drive maybe 3 or 4 days. I just make sure I hit all the bonuses. LA is the best place to drive. I love driving for Uber and Lyft. I've never seen so many polar opposite incomes, perspectives, everything, like I said in the beginning of this video. And I know, when it comes to videos like this, some people watch these videos because maybe they're curious, but most people watch these videos because they're like, well, I'm considering driving for Uber and Lyft in LA, in Boston, in Miami, in Chicago, or whatever. I just want to see the potential income. I want to see how it's like driving. And overall, again, serving tons of drivers because so many people have different experiences driving here. I think the biggest thing is, one, be prepared for a long ride. Now, granted, they could go either way, but given the traffic aspect, given the fact that it's just normal to commute a very far distance in LA, the rides are a lot longer, I think, typically, than, like, say, when I was driving in Boston, for example. Everyone from LA knows this, that even if someone moves to a different part of LA, you might not see him as much. One of my really good friends moved to Koreatown, which is very, very far from me. I haven't seen her in a while. If someone moves away from me, that's like say 45 minutes or an hour away, it can be very tricky. Like say, especially if you want to go out on a Friday night, I don't want to Uber, an hour away, spend all this money, and then keep in mind it's going to be a round trip Uber because I'm going to be drinking and whatnot. It's just a nightmare. This is part of living in LA. The second thing, which as you can imagine when it comes to LA, there are a lot of events. Events are a great way to make a lot of money. There's always something going on here. Whether it's a concert, a sporting event, whether it's some weird red carpet events for celebrities, some food event. I mean, pretty much any industry you can think of exists here. So 2, there are a lot of events. 3, you never know who you're going to pick up and drive around. I've heard of stories of people picking up celebrities or celebrities' friends or a very well-known influencer or whatever the case is. So I'll say that compared to any area, you're probably more likely going to pick up someone important than pretty much anywhere else. Maybe besides Vegas. Vegas and LA, I can see being very similar, if I have to be honest. But when it comes to the income in LA, I really did a ton of research. I interviewed, I have no idea how many drivers, honestly, for this video, just to get a conclusive number. Because as you can imagine, having 1 or 2 numbers compared to having 10 or 20 numbers, I have a lot better sample size, talking about statistics. And what's interesting is the more drivers I interviewed, the more confusing it became because I asked literally every single driver I had when taking an Uber and Lyft, how do things look here? How's your income? Blah, blah, blah. And the more that I asked people, the bigger the spread got of the average hourly rate or the average income, or if they like it or hate it, or somewhere in between. However, if I had to give a more specific number as opposed to that $20 to $35 an hour range, I'd say on average anywhere between $25 and $30 an hour. In addition, I find it's closer to about $30 an hour. I will say that about 75% of the drivers I talked to liked driving for Uber and Lyft. They made good money, and especially a lot of them stressed that the bonuses here are amazing. I'd say about 25% of the drivers did not like driving, and as you can imagine, which is probably not surprising, when it came to the drivers who love driving, they typically made a lot more money than the drivers who I talked to who didn't make that much at all. But one unique thing I noticed, let's say if I said, so what area do you live in? The drivers who tended to focus around areas like LAX, Hollywood, Santa Monica, these like big hot spots of LA, typically made more money and liked driving for Uber and Lyft more than other drivers who I talked to. They were like, I just kind of drive here and there, wherever they bring me. So they kind of just did it aimlessly, so to speak. One last thing I'll say about LA too when it comes to driving, especially compared to any other city, is a lot of drivers drive at almost any time. Now, I've said this before in a bunch of other videos. When I was driving in Boston, let's say at Tuesday at 1 p.m., just to give that exact timestamp, almost no one on the road. It was almost pointless for me to go out and drive pretty much Monday through Friday from, 11 a.m. to like 3 or 4 p.m. Nobody on the road. But here in LA, where people are actors, they're doing stunt work, they're doing entrepreneurship, they're doing kind of non-conventional work, and they have non-conventional schedules, people are always taking Ubers and Lyfts. It is not that kind of cliche area of everybody working 9 to 5. People have very weird and bizarre schedules. That is LA. So a lot of drivers I talk to would say, I drive mainly Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., which is a very kind of odd time to drive. Other drivers I talk to mainly focused on Friday and Saturday nights, which makes sense as a lot of other drivers do that in other cities. But I even got other perspectives. I talked to a lot of drivers who are like, look, I'm not gonna lie, I make the same money driving during the week than I would on a Friday and Saturday night. Sometimes Friday and Saturday nights, I make the least amount of money. So why would I drive on a Friday night and deal with drunk people when I can make more money and drive around people who are sober, who are just hanging out in the car, trying to get from point A to point B. So overall, I know I've kind of bounced around a lot in this video, but at the end of the day, I gotta say that driving here in LA when interviewing all these drivers seems to have the biggest spread of how much money you can make. There's a very big spread if you like driving or you don't like driving, And then lastly, of course, just the driving nature. Like I said in a lot of other videos, Friday nights, typically you're going to make the most amount of money. Here in LA, maybe not. Maybe it's the same, or maybe it's the opposite. Maybe you don't make as much because since everyone's schedule is non-conventional, maybe you're just better off driving whenever you feel like it, whenever you want to. Just look at the analytics and then go from there. Because remember, at the end of the day, it is all about the analytics. I talked about this in the number one way to make the most amount of money driving for Uber and Lyft, and it comes down to analytics. Drive as much as you can. Look at all the numbers. See, okay, do we make more money on a Friday night or a Saturday night? Do I make more money Monday during the day or Friday night? Do I make more money Saturday and Sunday during the day as opposed to the nighttime? Because a lot of times, especially here in LA, when people go to their friend's place, they'll probably crash there. They don't want to Uber back at night an hour across town like I have before. So they crash at their friend's place and they order that Uber Saturday or Sunday morning. You might make more money then than a Friday or Saturday night. These are all things that kind of are variable. But at the end of the day, out of any area I've ever been to, LA seems to have the most unique driving climate, period.